Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sophia and today I thought I would start a little mini series of videos basically working towards making a piped cushion cover. A few people have asked for it now, so I thought it might be a good video to do, but I am a little bit crazy busy at the moment, so what I thought is I'd split it up into a few different videos so that I have like shorter videos to do. And also it means that if there's just one element that you need to know, because there's quite a few elements involved, then at least then there's a video reference to that one element. So the first part of our little mini series is how to make your own bias binding. Now, bias binding is very common to buy in the shops. It's not expensive, but if you want it matching to your cushion cover or your cushion fabric, or you want it in a particular colour and you just can't find it, then it's really easy to make your own. So I'm going to show you how to make your own bias binding. The benefit of making bias binding rather than just cutting strips of fabric is that it has give, so it has a little bit of stretch and movement in it because it's cut on the bias. So it means that you can use it for a wide variety of things. So I know a few of you have asked me to do videos on bias finished necklines and armholes. I have added it to my list, I just haven't got around to filming it yet. But again, if you wanted some bias to match your top or the fabric that you have, then you can make it yourself. So there's a little video on how to make your own bias binding, so enjoy. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is cut our strips of bias. So what you need to do is first cut a large square of the fabric that you want to make your bias from. It does help if you leave a selvage edge on one edge just for reference. I will try and explain as best I can how to do this. But basically the selvage will help you fold it the right way. So if we think about fabric, where our selvage edge across the fabric is the two sides of where it's attached when it's printed and designed and dyed, and those selvage edges also represent the grain line of the fabric. So the bias is exactly 45 degrees across. So if you imagine that this is our selvage edge here, I want to fold my square in a triangle like this. So this will give our 45-degree angle. That's why it helps to cut a square first, because you basically have 90-degree angles, and then when you fold it into a triangle, dead in half, it's always going to be 45 degrees. So I'm going to now fold this entire square at this 45 degrees. So I've got a nice sort of bandana shape here. There's my selvage edge, which is the straight edge, and there's my sort of 45-degree fold into a triangle. I hope this is making sense. But now basically this long folded edge here is going to be our first line that we cut. So if I keep it at this angle, it might help. So what I normally do is I use my rotary cutter and a ruler to cut my strips. Now my ruler is about 4 centimeters wide, which is just shy of 2 inches. So it's entirely up to you how wide you cut your bias, but I'd recommend anywhere between 1.5 inches, 2 inches, or like between 4 and 6 centimeters works really well. So it depends on your overall effect really, but let's just go for 4 centimeters for now. So what I'll do is, if I actually turn this around, it'll be a lot easier. I'll put my ruler alongside the edge, so I've got my folded edge here. Let me straighten that up, and then I'll just use my rotary cutter alongside the ruler and start cutting long strips. And no, I haven't changed my blade yet. It needs changing. Every time I go to the shop I forget to pick up a blade for myself. Okay, so here's my first strip of fabric. Now this is on the fold, so what I'm going to do now is go along with my ruler and my rotary cutter, and I'll just cut this in half, and then I've already got 2 strips. But essentially you want enough strips so that you have way more bias than you need, because I'm going to show you how to sew it all together. But basically just keep going, especially if you're making a large cushion, you want to pipe all the way around the outside. So say you have a 40 centimetre cushion, so like a 16-inch cushion pad. You want sort of 40 plus 40 plus 40 plus 40, which, come on Soph, quick maths, 160 centimetres. So for that, I would at least minimum have 2 meters worth of bias for this. Because you need extra to play with, and especially when you're starting out, you will make a few mistakes. So it's better to have more than less. Okay, so now I have loads and loads of, I say loads and loads, I have about 8 strips of my bias cut fabric. So now we want to join all of these together because these are all in sort of strips of about 50 centimetres, and we want to join them all together now. So what you're now going to do is join them. Now the first time you do this can look a little bit confusing, so I'm going to go as slow as possible. But if you get one strip, you'll see at the ends where you fold it into a triangle, you'll have like another 45-degree angle off of the ends. So if you lay that out at 45 degrees, you're going to get another piece. Now, this will be slightly different because my fabric is double-sided. So if you have a plain colour, it will be the same. If you have a patterned cotton that's got right sides and wrong sides, then you might want to just make sure that you're doing it the right way round. But it will be, I should have really done that because that's the hardest way of doing it. But I have gone easy and I've used a double-sided fabric. So what you need to do is lay your strips on top of one another at a 45 degrees so that you'll have your 90-degree angle in this middle bit here. Now you want them touching, so if this was right sides and wrong sides, this one would be right sides up and this will be right sides down, so that the right sides are touching underneath here where we're joining them. Now if you overlap them, you'll see that there's a little triangle here and there's a little triangle here. That is where you're going to sew between. So you're literally going to sew from there to there, so where those two triangles are pointing into. And then if I just hold that, if you fold it along that line, that's what you'll eventually end up with. So if you want to fold it to visualize it, then do, because then you can see how it's going to join from the inside. Now, if I was being really fussy, I could pattern match this all the way along, but I'm not going to do that because it's going to take me so much more time. Now, it doesn't matter how much you cross them over, because if I put them like that, if I still sewed between those two triangles that are pointing towards each other, if I fold it there, it will still end up with being one long line, except I've now got to trim off a lot of excess. So the closer you put them together, the less wastage you'll have. So it's all about seam allowance, but honestly, even if I did it like that and I cross them over, I've still got a 90-degree here, and I've got two much bigger arrows pointing towards each other. Those points there, if I still sewed between there, I would still get the same effect. I would just have to cut off all of these excess ends. So it's up to you how much fabric you want to waste really. So I go for as little as possible, about between a 10 and 15 mil seam allowance from this top edge really. And we're just going to sew between those 2 points until we've got a long, long line. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. That's where I've sewn between my 2 points. And that was about 15 mil seam allowance, so I've got minimum wastage. So now what I've done is from the back I've pressed those seams open, and if we flip it over we have a lovely join here, same width all the way along. There's my join. So all you then do is chop your excess triangles off either side, and then you can join your next piece. But the thing to remember is if you've got a double-sided fabric like mine, it's very easy to forget which way up the next piece is, because what you don't want is some going that way and nice and neat, and then some with the seam allowances on show. So you just need to make sure that you're checking each time you put it down. So my method, which always helps me, is when I've got my mat in front of me, I always put the strip right sides up this side, and then my next strip I'll put right sides down on the other side. So I know this is a bit confusing because I've got double-sided fabrics, but I always make sure that my left hand strip is right sides up and my right hand strip is right sides down, and that helps me remember every single time I'm joining them that all of them are going to end up the same way around. So essentially you just want to keep joining them until you've got enough bias or enough strips of fabric joined together to go around whatever you're making. Okay, so once you've joined all your strips together, you should have loads of strips all with your joins now neatly pressed open, and then the little edges trimmed. So from the front they all look lovely and neat. So next we are going to fold our bias strips in half. So we're just going to fold them so that the seam allowances are all on the inside. And then what you'll want to do is grab your iron and press that in half all the way along your strip. So I'm going to do that now. Now I will say you don't actually have to do this next part. You can just leave it as is, or even just leave it pressed out. But I'm going to just show you the next step to make it look like a bias binding that you buy in the shops that you'd use for your dressmaking and things. Okay, so now we have bias cut strips pressed in half, which means that when we open it out we have a lovely neat halfway line to follow. So now the tricky part to finish our bias binding is to fold the edges into that center fold line. Now there are tools that you can buy that sort of like run along it as you iron, but I've never got one because I just do it this way. So you just fold it to that center fold where you've pressed, and then you're going to now press that flat all the way along so that you should end up with something that looks like that. So I'm just going to go to my iron for a few minutes and press all of those edges into the middle. So once you've done that, you should have something that looks like this. And that's our bias binding. So it's got movement, it's got stretch, and it just looks super, super neat. So this is now what you can use for finishing armholes and necklines and things like that, which I will show you in another video very, very soon. It's on my list, don't worry. But if you are making piping cord, you might want to leave it in half like this. And I'm going to show you in another video how to turn our bias strips like this into piping cord. Okay, so I really hope you enjoyed that, and I hope it all made sense. It's not that difficult, and like I said, you can get tools and things like that to help you, but you really, really don't need them. I have never ever used a tool to make my own bias binding. I've always just made it like this. So yeah, I hope it was really useful, and hopefully I will see you very soon for part 2 of our piped cushion tutorial. Happy handmade, everyone!